Welcome back, Night Watchers, to Nakora Nights. Tonight we follow the ones who guard the mountains when the world sleeps, the Appalachia Park Rangers. But these aren't just stories about patrols or nature. These are true encounters. Terrifying reports buried in logs, whispered between rangers who never spoke again. You'll hear about rangers finding footprints that start and end in the middle of nowhere, radio calls from patrols that don't exist, and strange voices whispering from the trees, calling them by name. Before we step into these haunted trails, tell me, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it where you are? Because the deeper you go into these stories, the louder the forest starts to listen. If you're ready to walk the dark paths with me, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below. I survived the Appalachia Ranger shifts if you make it through all 10. Now, grab your flashlight, keep your radio close, and don't look behind you. This is 10 Untold Most Disturbing True Appalachia Park Ranger Horror Stories. Let's begin. I've been a park ranger for 7 years, stationed deep in the Appalachia wilderness, patrolling the old ridges and valleys where fog moves like a living thing. My name's Cole Matthews, and before all of this, I used to think I understood nature. I thought the woods were my escape, a place to breathe when the world got too loud. I was wrong. When you spend enough time out here, you start to realize the forest listens. It watches, and sometimes, if you're unlucky enough, it talks back. I grew up in a small town just outside of Pine Hollow, a quiet stretch of Appalachia where people still lock their doors at sunset. My father was a logger, the kind who believed the woods were tools, not spirits. My mother used to tell me something different, that the mountains had memory, that they never forgot those who disrespected them. She said that's why my father never came home one winter night. He went up the ridge to cut a tree he wasn't supposed to touch. They found his axe a week later buried in a tree trunk, but not him. Maybe that's why I became a ranger. Maybe I thought I could make peace with the place that took him. That weekend started like any other patrol. Early October, air sharp enough to sting your lungs. The leaves were turning fire red, painting the hills in color. I'd been assigned a 3-day rotation along the North Hollow Trail, an area that hadn't had visitors in months. The place was beautiful, dense with oak, poplar, and endless fog, but the radios always cut out there. Locals called it the still stretch. By mid-afternoon, I loaded up my truck with the usual gear: maps, flare gun, first aid kit, flashlight, and hit the road. It was a long, winding climb through gravel and dirt roads that seemed to shift beneath the tires. Somewhere around 2:17 p.m., I crossed the old Ranger Gate. After that, it was nothing but forest and silence. There's a rule out here. When the woods go quiet, pay attention. By dusk, I reached my checkpoint, a clearing near an old cabin that hadn't been used in decades. The air was colder up here, the kind of cold that seeps through your jacket and into your bones. I unpacked, built a small fire, and tried to shake off the sense that I wasn't alone. It wasn't fear at first, just unease, the kind that hums in your ribs. After the fire settled into a steady crackle, I sat down with a cup of instant coffee, the kind that tastes like burnt dust. The forest was alive with night sounds, crickets, frogs, the distant hoot of an owl. But then, like a switch flipped, it all went still. The sound of my own breathing became too loud. I told myself it was just the wind. It wasn't. I first heard it around 7:45 p.m., a sound like footsteps in the leaves, slow and steady, just beyond the light of the fire. I froze. The crunch came again, closer. My hand went instinctively to my flashlight. The beam sliced through the darkness, landing on nothing but trees. The woods stood still, tall and unmoving. Maybe it's a deer, I thought, maybe a bear. But deep down, something colder pressed against my thoughts. Something that whispered, "No, it's not." I stayed still for a long time, listening, but the footsteps stopped. When I finally crawled into my tent, the silence felt heavier than sound. Sometime in the night, I woke up gasping, like someone had been watching me dream. The air inside the tent was freezing. My breath fogged in front of me. Then I heard it, my own voice whispering from outside the tent. "Go home. You're not supposed to be here." Every hair on my body stood up. My voice, soft, calm, unmistakably mine, came again from the trees, echoing low and steady. "Go home, Cole." I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. My flashlight was inches from my hand, but my body refused to reach for it. Then, just as suddenly, silence. The kind that swallows everything. When I finally unzipped the tent and shined my light outside, nothing moved. Just fog curling through the trees. But the next morning, I found something that made my stomach twist. My truck keys buried in the dirt 5 feet deep, directly behind my tent. The soil around them was warm, like they had just been dropped there. I didn't tell anyone. Rangers talk, and once your name gets tied to weird stories, you get pulled off the field. I told myself it was stress, maybe sleepwalking. But as I started my patrol that morning, something was wrong with time. My route should have taken 2 hours. I stopped at each checkpoint, logged my entries, did everything by the book. But when I finally checked my watch, it was past noon. 6 hours had disappeared, just gone. The sun had shifted completely across the sky, and I couldn't remember a single moment between one checkpoint and the next. The woods seemed different. The air thicker, the light dimmer even though it was midday. The trees looked the same, yet wrong, leaning just slightly as if they'd been watching me move through them. That night, I stayed in the old cabin. I don't know why. Maybe I thought being inside 4 walls would make me feel safer. The place smelled like rot and mildew, like something had lived there and left in a hurry. The walls were covered in carvings. I ran my fingers over them, tracing the shapes, triangles, circles, and something that looked like an eye. One carving stopped me cold. It was a name, my name, my name. Cole Matthews. I stepped back, heart pounding, trying to breathe. The wood around the letters looked freshly cut, the shavings still soft. The wind outside picked up, moaning through the cracks in the boards. I thought about calling it in, but the radio was dead, no static, no click, nothing. I turned off my flashlight, letting the darkness settle around me. That's when I saw movement outside the window. At first, I thought it was the reflection of the firelight. But then it moved against the light, a shape tall and thin, gliding between the trees. It stopped at the edge of the clearing. Something about the way it moved wasn't right. It didn't walk, it just shifted. I stared, breath held, pulse hammering in my ears. The thing tilted its head, and I swear I saw it smile, not like a person smiles. Like it was stretching its face too far, like skin shouldn't move that way. I ducked down, heart slamming, afraid it might see me. For a long moment I waited, counting the seconds in my head. The fire flickered low. When I finally looked up again, it was gone. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound, every creak of the cabin made my nerves jump. I thought I heard whispering, soft, rhythmic, like something speaking through the walls. At one point, I saw a shadow move across the window again. But when I looked outside, there was nothing but fog. By morning, the forest felt wrong. The light was too dim, like dawn had forgotten to rise. The air was thick, heavy. I packed up, ready to leave, but when I walked back toward the trail, the path had changed. The trees weren't where they should have been. The landmarks I'd used for years were gone. I walked for hours trying to find my bearings, but the more I moved, the deeper I seemed to go. The woods around me whispered, the leaves shifting like murmurs. Then I heard something that froze me in place, a voice calling my name. Cole. It was the same tone, the same inflection as mine. Cole, go home. The words came from behind me. I turned fast, flashlight shaking in my hand, but there was only forest. And then I saw it again. The figure. It stood in the mist, half shrouded by trees, taller now, its limbs bending at strange angles. Its head tilted like it was studying me. I took a step back, and it moved forward in perfect sync, matching me. The air went cold, my breath crystallizing. I whispered, "Stop," and it did. For a second, I thought maybe it was mocking me. Then it raised its arm, impossibly long, and pointed to the ground. At its feet was something familiar. My own ranger hat lying in the dirt. When I picked it up, the ground beneath it felt soft, freshly dug. My fingers brushed against metal. I scraped the soil away and felt my stomach turn. It was my truck keys again, still warm. I ran. Branches tore at my jacket, my legs burned, my lungs screamed for air. I didn't care. I just ran until my legs gave out. When I finally stopped, it was pitch dark. The forest pressed close, claustrophobic. I collapsed against a tree, chest heaving. The woods were silent again. No crickets, no wind. Just me. Then, somewhere in the dark, my own voice whispered one more time, "You're too late, Cole." I woke up at dawn, lying beside my truck. The engine was running. The radio was on, hissing static. I don't remember getting there. My boots were caked in mud, my uniform torn. The clock on the dashboard read 9:23 a.m., but the patrol log said I'd been gone for 30 hours. No one believed me when I told them I'd gotten lost. They laughed, said I probably fell asleep somewhere on the trail. But I know what I saw. Because that night, after I got home, I found something outside my door. A small pile of soil, my truck keys resting on top, still warm. I didn't go back to the park after that. I transferred out within a week. But sometimes late at night, I still hear the forest, the way it goes quiet, the way it listens. And sometimes, if I listen closely enough, I can still hear my own voice calling from the trees. Go home, Cole. You're not supposed to be here. I never meant to find that ridge. I just wanted quiet, that kind of silence that makes your own breath sound too loud. I didn't know silence could lie. I was camping alone in a stretch of the southern Appalachia most people skip over, somewhere between the worn-down hills of West Virginia and the lost folds of eastern Kentucky. Locals call it the Blackveil Range, though it doesn't show up under that name on any map. I'd spent the past few years chasing isolation places the park brochures forgot, where trails were fading back into dirt, and the signs leaned so far they looked ashamed to stand. My name's Noah Grant. I wasn't some thrill-seeker or hiker chasing ghosts, though maybe I was kidding myself. I'd left my job as a county surveyor a year back after an accident took my partner down a ravine during a storm. I told myself I just needed air and peace, that I'd get back out there when the noise inside my head went quiet, but it never really did. The woods had always been my comfort, and I thought maybe they could still be my cure. When I stopped at a ranger outpost near a half-forgotten town called Millerton, the place looked like time had abandoned it. There was one truck outside, one man inside. He wore the old khaki ranger uniform, the kind you don't see anymore, with threadbare patches and a face that had seen too many dawns. His name tag was half rubbed off, but I think it said R. Maddox. I asked if there were any quiet trails left, something unlisted or overgrown. He just looked at me for a moment, chewing his cheek like he was choosing whether to lie. Then he said flatly, "There's a ridge trail north of Fair Creek, not on the map anymore. Not maintained." Then he added after a pause, "Locals don't go there." Of course, I asked why. He leaned back, exhaled through his nose, and said, "People get lost there. Not just wander off lost, they come back wrong. Not screaming, not hurt, just different. One team said they walked a loop that never ended. Another found trees where there shouldn't have been any. One guy swore his compass spun like a top. They called it a local legend. He said it like a warning meant for someone who wouldn't listen. I smiled, thanked him, and walked out, pretending I didn't already know I'd go there. The trail wasn't on the GPS, but the faint groove of an old logging path led toward a rise north of the creek. The air smelled still, like rain before it happens. I reached the ridge near dusk, found a small clearing under a crooked pine, and pitched my tent beside an old fire ring made of river stones. It looked like no one had camped there in years. I built a small fire, cooked a pouch of soup, wrote a few notes in my journal, and tried to shake off the strange feeling the ranger had left in me. I'd heard stories before, hunters vanishing, hikers seeing things, but something about his tone stuck. It wasn't fear. It was resignation. Like the woods had rules, and he'd stopped arguing with them. When I zipped into my tent, the world outside went too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just a kind of pressure on the air that made the fabric of the tent feel thinner. I told myself it was altitude or exhaustion and closed my eyes. At dawn, I woke to stillness. No sound, no birds. My first thought was that the fire must have burned too long. Maybe I'd left embers. But when I stepped out, the fire ring was gone, completely gone. The stones were missing, the ground smooth and damp like no one had ever touched it. My tent, my pack, everything else was right where I left it. Only the fire ring had vanished, leaving a bare patch of earth like it had been erased. The forest looked almost identical to before, but not quite. The trees leaned differently. The slope underfoot felt shallower, and the sun looked wrong-angled where it shouldn't be. I packed my gear, more unsettled than scared, and decided to head back toward the trailhead. An hour later, I came to a fork. Two paths, equally narrow, neither familiar. I didn't remember passing it yesterday. I picked the left, thinking I could reorient once I reached higher ground. It dipped through a gully, curved past a line of white birch, and when I climbed the next rise, I froze. I was back at my campsite. Same pine tree, same indentation where my tent had been, even the faint print of my boot in the dirt. It wasn't possible. I'd walk straight, check my bearings, mark direction by the sun. Still, I'd come back to the same place. To test it, I took out my knife and carved a deep line into a nearby trunk. 3 slashes, jagged and deliberate. Then I started walking again, careful, steady. Every few yards I made another mark. I went on for maybe half an hour, the forest folding into endless sameness, until I turned around to check. Nothing. The trees were clean. Bark smooth as if untouched. That's when the unease turned to something worse. The woods began to sound wrong. Branches cracked too close together, then too far apart. The wind shifted directions mid-breath. I thought I heard water running but found no stream. Then, the sound stopped altogether. I whispered to myself to keep moving, my voice shaky, too loud in the silence. When the trail vanished completely into undergrowth, I stumbled onto a fallen log and sat down, dizzy. I took a sip of water and blinked. That's when I saw it, my name carved into the log. Noah. Not fresh. Weathered, darkened, like it had been there for years. I didn't breathe for a while. I couldn't have carved it. I hadn't even seen this log before, yet the edges were burnt, faintly blackened. I touched it and felt warmth, like fading coals. I got up, started walking again, faster this time, ignoring direction. I just needed out. Every sound in the forest felt closer now, every shadow longer. At some point, the air began to smell faintly of smoke. I thought maybe there was another camper ahead, maybe a search team. I followed the smell like it was hope. When I reached the source, I stopped cold. It was my fire ring, rebuilt exactly the way I'd made it. The same stones, the same crescent-shaped mark where my soup packet had burned. The ashes were still warm. But my tent was gone. Only my pack was left, leaning against the same pine. That's when my flashlight flickered on by itself. I hadn't touched it. The beam swept across the trees, landed on something that looked like a figure, but when it passed through, there was nothing. The light didn't reflect. It slipped through like smoke. My chest went tight. I picked up the flashlight and tried again. Every time the beam touched a trunk or a shadow, it passed through for a second, then reappeared on the other side. Like the forest wasn't solid anymore. Then came the knock. 3 slow taps on the tent flap that wasn't there anymore. The sound came from behind me. I turned, nothing. Then I noticed something new beside my pack. My journal, open. A page torn out. Words scrawled across it in my own handwriting. He's already here. My hand shook so hard the page fluttered from my grip. The smell of smoke thickened. I couldn't tell where it came from. I backed up until my legs hit the log again and sat without meaning to. The ground felt soft, almost like breathing under me. At some point, I must have blacked out. When I came to, it was still dark. My watch read 2:17 a.m. The fire was gone again. My boots were soaked through, dripping, though I hadn't moved. My tent was back, zipped shut. My knife lay on top of it, blade buried into the fabric. Inside, my logbook waited, a fresh copy. Same pages, same cover. But when I opened it, every entry was dated 1 day ahead. even this one. When dawn came, I left. I didn't even take the pack. I just walked, no trail, no compass. I don't know how long it took, but I stumbled out onto gravel, a service road. A truck rolled up eventually, 2 maintenance workers inside. They stopped when they saw me, faces pale. I asked what day it was. They said it was Sunday. I'd left the station on Tuesday. They offered me a ride. I said yes, too tired to speak. On the drive down, I stared at my hands, trying to keep them from shaking. When we passed the ranger outpost, I asked if Maddox was still there. The older worker looked at me like I'd said something wrong. He said, "Our Maddox died 3 winters ago." I don't remember getting out of the truck, but later, when I finally made it home and unpacked, my journal wasn't in the bag. Just one loose page folded inside a damp boot. It said, "Go back. Finish what you started." Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of 3 knocks. My boots are always wet. My flashlight still turns on by itself, its beam cutting through the dark like the air isn't real. And every time I check my logbook, there's another page waiting written for tomorrow. My name's Wes Claiborne, Senior Ranger for the southern stretch of Appalachia Park, stationed near Briar Ridge. I've worked these woods for 13 years, long enough to know every crooked tree and every silence that doesn't sound quite right. I tell people the forest is alive. Most laugh. Some nod like they understand. Only a few, those who've spent enough nights alone out here, know it's not just alive, it's aware. I started this job after my partner Jess passed away. We were both rangers once, stationed together along the same ridgeline. A flash flood took her 3 years back. I still hear her name whispered when the wind slides down the hollows. People say grief makes you hear things. Maybe it does, but what I've heard lately isn't grief, it's imitation. That week had started normal enough. The trails were slick from rain, and the tourists were few. I'd been asked to check a part of the old smoky stretch that hadn't seen a patrol since spring. Budget cuts, they said. It was the kind of place maps called undeveloped terrain, which really meant we stopped maintaining it decades ago. I left at dawn, the air still heavy with mist, the kind that curls around your boots and follows you uphill. The radio cracked once before fading into static. Out there, the trees grow so close, they seem to lean in when you pass, listening. By noon, I'd reached a ridge where the trail broke into 3 faint paths. I picked the middle one, the least visible. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my own steps on damp soil. Then I saw it. A mirror nailed to a tree trunk, right at eye level. It was old, the kind of glass that ripples when you move, with edges chipped and darkened by weather. My reflection stared back, but my smile didn't. I wasn't even smiling, but the reflection was wide, slow, like it was waiting for me to notice. I stepped back. The reflection didn't. It just stood there, frozen in that grin. A chill crawled up my neck. I turned away, convincing myself it was just the light, just the way old glass bends faces. But when I walked off, I heard something faint behind me, a soft click like someone tapping their nails on the mirror. I should have gone back to the station right then, but duty's a hard habit to break, and I told myself I'd finish the loop before dark. By 3:15 p.m., clouds had rolled in fast, covering the sun. I crossed a small stream and spotted boot tracks on the other side, 3 pairs heading north. Fresh. I figured some hikers had wandered off the trail, so I followed. Half an hour later, I saw them. 3 hikers in raincoats, walking single file down the slope. But something about them stopped me cold. Their faces looked wrong. From far off, I thought they were wearing masks, but as I got closer, I realized their faces didn't move. The expressions were painted on flat smiles with bright, even brushstrokes, like the faces had been drawn onto flesh. I called out, asked if they were lost. They didn't answer, didn't even turn their heads. Just kept walking, perfectly steady. Then one of them stopped. Slowly, the head turned toward me, the neck creaking like something stiff and unused. The face, if you could call it that, wasn't human anymore. The eyes were glossy black, and that painted smile seemed to twitch wider without the skin moving. I blinked, and they were gone. No sound of steps retreating, no rustle through leaves, just gone. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran like hell. When I finally stopped, gasping near an old campsite clearing, I realized I'd circled back near the ridge. My radio crackled just once. A whisper slipped through, soft and wet sounding like lips brushing the mic. "Wes," it said my name, the way Jess used to say it. I froze. "Jess?" I said before I could stop myself. The forest went dead silent. No wind, no rustle, not a single sound. It was like the world held its breath. When the silence broke, it wasn't the forest that moved, it was the voice again, closer this time, just behind me. "Wes," it said, "you found it." I turned, flashlight sweeping through the trees, catching only the fog until something reflected my beam. Another mirror, this one leaning against a stump. My breath hitched. My reflection looked pale, hollow-eyed, but still mine. Then it blinked before I did. I dropped the light, fell backward into the dirt. The glass quivered. Something behind the reflection moved, something that didn't belong in the surface of glass or the world behind it. I ran again, this time toward the ranger cabin half a mile north. My boots slipped on roots, the ground slick from old rain. My heart hammered so loud it drowned everything else. By the time I reached the cabin, dusk had settled, 7:45 p.m. The lock hung broken, door half open. Inside, it smelled of damp wood and dust. I found an old radio on the counter, tried calling base. Nothing but static and whispers that didn't match the rhythm of speech. Outside, the forest shifted. Leaves rustled, then went still again. Then I heard footsteps on the porch, slow, uneven, dragging. One foot scraped like it was being pulled. I raised my flashlight and waited. The beam caught movement, something standing in the doorway. It was tall, shoulders hunched, head tilted too far to one side. I couldn't see its face at first. Then it stepped into the light. It was wearing my uniform, my badge, my name tag, and my face. Except it wasn't me. It was the version from the mirror, smiling wide and wrong. Its eyes glistened black like the painted hikers. I fired the flare gun. The red light burst across the room, painting the walls in flame color. The thing shrieked, not loud but deep, like wood splitting under pressure. When the light faded, it was gone. The next few hours blurred into something dreamlike. I remember grabbing my bag, stumbling out of the cabin, following the sound of running water until I hit the main trail. My compass spun uselessly, the needle twitching back and forth. At one point, I swear I saw Jess again, standing between two birches. She was smiling, but not kindly. Her eyes shimmered, and her voice came low, almost curious. "You shouldn't have said my name." Then she vanished, just like the hikers. By the time dawn crept in, I found myself near the old ranger station. I don't remember the last mile. My body just carried itself until I saw the familiar wooden sign. The air felt heavy, like the world hadn't reset yet. I stumbled to the door, leaned against it, and waited. When the other rangers found me, I must have looked like hell. My boots were covered in mud, my uniform ripped, my radio missing. They asked what happened. I told them a storm hit. I didn't tell them about the mirrors, or the hikers with painted faces, or how silence itself watched me when I said her name. But that night, as I sat in the station's break room, I noticed something out the window. A reflection in the glass, me sitting at the table. But the reflection smiled first. And behind it, in the dark, something else leaned close taller, wearing my uniform. Its hand rested on my shoulder in the reflection, though I felt nothing on my skin. I looked away, heart pounding, telling myself I was tired, half dreaming. But when I looked back, there was only one reflection, not mine, just the one smiling. I smashed the window with a chair, but when the glass shattered, there was no sound, only silence, heavy and full, like the forest's breath holding again. They say the mountains remember what we leave behind. Sometimes I think they remember too much. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind shifts through the pines, I hear three voices calling my name. One that sounds like Jess, one that sounds like me, and one that I don't recognize at all. I never answer anymore. But every morning when I check the trees near my post, there's always another mirror nailed somewhere new, waiting. And in each reflection, I'm always smiling first. I never used to believe the stories people whispered about the Smoky Ridges. But that was before last October, before the night I stopped thinking of the forest as a place that just breathed with wind and trees. My name's Caleb Morgan, Senior Ranger at Redwater Park, tucked deep in the Appalachian stretch of North Carolina. I've seen just about everything the woods can throw at a person. Storms, bears, lightning strikes, even a few lost hikers who claimed they saw lights moving through the trees. You learn to shrug things off after a while, until something refuses to let you. I wasn't even supposed to take time off that weekend. We were short on staff, but my friends had been pushing me for months to finally join them on a trip. We weren't planning anything fancy, just a cheap getaway. Me, Ryan, Mitch, and Dylan. 3 guys I'd known since academy days, back when we thought life out here would be all clean air and campfires. They'd been pestering me to do something real for once, not just patrol trails and write citations for illegal camping. A proper trip, no maps, no permits, just freedom. Ryan borrowed his cousin's old camper van, a clunky white thing that rattled like bones every time the wheels hit a bump. The paint was peeling, the door stuck half the time, and the floor sagged in the middle. It smelled like old rain and regret. But it had a stove that half worked, a roof, and enough space to crash inside without needing tents. That was good enough for us. When Ryan's cousin handed us the keys, he smirked and said the thing hadn't been driven in 6 years. Told us to expect mildew, spiders, maybe even a nest of something living under the seats. He wasn't wrong. The first hour we spent scrubbing, spraying, and swearing. By sunset, we'd filled the camper with sleeping bags, coolers, and way too much junk food. We were ready. Our destination wasn't even on the official map. Dylan had found it, an old ranger road that branched off near a forgotten section of the park boundary, somewhere past Hollow Ridge. He'd read about it on some obscure blog, the kind that posts creepy forest legends with bad photos. Supposedly, the road led toward the ruins of an abandoned homestead from the 1800s. That was the appeal. No crowds, no campgrounds, just pure quiet isolation. By the time we hit dirt road, our phones were dead zones. No signal, no signs, just trees swallowing the light as the sun fell behind the ridge. The van groaned the entire way, scraping against branches and rocks. When we finally parked, it was dark enough that the stars had started bleeding through the treetops. That first night felt almost peaceful. We built a small fire, argued over who burned the hot dogs, and drank beers that were already getting warm. The sound of crickets and a crackling fire always has a way of shrinking the world, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the silence between our laughter went too deep. There's a kind of quiet the forest keeps, not empty, but listening. Later, inside the camper, the cold crept in through the thin walls. I couldn't sleep. Every few minutes I swore I heard something outside. A twig snap, leaves shifting, small noises that didn't belong to wind. I told myself it was just wildlife. I'd lived in these woods long enough to know better than to panic over sounds. Still, every time I looked through the narrow camper window, all I saw were still trees, standing too straight, too still, watching. Morning came gray and wet. Ryan cooked half-burned eggs on the portable stove while Mitch checked our gear. Dylan was already itching to explore. He said we should follow the trail up the ridge. The map app was useless, but he had the route saved from the blog, an old trail marker path that led somewhere interesting. None of us knew what that meant, but when you're out there, curiosity beats reason, always does. About an hour into the hike, we met a man. He looked like a ranger at first. Green jacket, tan hat, heavy boots, but something was off. No patch, no name tag, and his jacket looked older than I'd ever seen issued. He was tall, with that kind of face that looked carved by wind and sun, eyes pale and unblinking. He stopped just a few feet from us, stared like he was counting our faces. He spoke in a low voice, calm but strange. Said we should stay careful, that bears had been seen near the ridge. When Dylan mentioned the old homestead ruins, the man's whole body seemed to tense. He shook his head slowly and said something that stuck to my mind like burrs. "There's nothing up there but rot and silence." Then he turned and stepped off the trail, vanishing into the brush so quietly it was like he dissolved into it. We stood there, watching where he'd gone until even the rustling stopped. Ryan cracked a joke, called him Ghost Carl. We laughed, but my stomach twisted. Something about the way the man said it didn't sound like warning. It sounded like regret. That night, Dylan pulled out his drone. He'd packed it just to mess around, but the thing had a cheap thermal camera, so we decided to see if there were any animals nearby. The feed flickered in and out, static jumping across the small screen as the drone buzzed over the clearing. For a few minutes, it was normal. Trees, rocks, the creek glinting under moonlight. Then shapes started appearing. Heat signatures, small glowing blips scattered in a rough circle. They weren't animals, too still, too cold around the edges. They pulsed faintly like something under the ground was exhaling warmth. Dylan said it was probably sunlight stored in rocks, but that made no sense. These mountains aren't geothermal. We argued until the battery died. Then we went to bed pretending we hadn't seen anything. The next morning, we found the place. The trail opened into a clearing I'd never seen on any map. The air changed the second we stepped in, thin and drained, like something had sucked all the life out of it. The trees around the edges were pale, stripped of color. And in the middle stood a chimney, tall and alone, blackened brick reaching up into the empty air. No cabin, no roof, just the chimney. Around it were scattered remains, nails rusted into curls, glass half buried in dirt, warped metal tools too corroded to tell what they once were. It was clear a home had stood there once, long enough for nature to start erasing it. That's when I heard it. A woman's voice, soft and far away, humming the same few notes again and again. No words, no melody, just repetition. I froze. The others were still talking, not noticing. The sound came from the far edge of the clearing. I stepped forward before realizing what I was doing. The moment my boot touched the bricks at the chimney's base, the humming stopped. Not faded, stopped, like the air itself had been cut. I said nothing to the others. We left a few minutes later, pretending it was just another piece of history. That night, I woke suddenly. The clock on the camper's dashboard read 2:17 a.m. Total silence. Not even the hum of wind. It was the kind of stillness that presses against your eardrums. Then came the breathing, slow, heavy, right outside the camper wall near my head. Each exhale long, deliberate, too steady to be animal. My pulse climbed. I wanted to look, but I couldn't move. After maybe 30 seconds, the breathing stopped. Not footsteps leaving, just gone. At dawn, Ryan found the prints behind the camper. They weren't animal, not human either. 5 toes, but too long, oddly spaced. They circled the camper twice, then vanished into the trees. No broken twigs, no drag marks. Just clean, perfect impressions like something had stepped down lightly enough not to disturb the world around it. We should have left then. Instead, Dylan checked the drone footage again. For most of the night, nothing. Then, just before the feed cut, something moved at the tree line. A silhouette, thin, long-armed, not walking. Just standing, tilted slightly like it was listening. We didn't speak for a long time after that. Later that afternoon, I found something in my sleeping bag. A piece of fabric, pale blue, frayed at the edges, like it had been part of a dress. It was dry, but smelled faintly of wet leaves. I hadn't packed it. Neither had they. I'd been alone in the camper that morning while the others fished by the creek. I didn't mention it. What was I supposed to say? As evening came, fog rolled in, thick, heavy, swallowing everything past 10 feet. It muffled sound until even our own breathing felt distant. The fire hissed uselessly against it. That's when the whispering began. At first, it was just noise, soft, scattered, like wind threading through branches. Then it shaped itself. Voices. Low, overlapping, words too faint to understand. We all heard it. None of us said a thing. We sat in the camper with the lights on, pretending the world outside hadn't changed. The whispers circled the camper, moving slow, like people walking around us in the dark. Ryan cracked the window, maybe to prove it was nothing. Something tapped the glass once. Sharp, deliberate, like a fingernail. We sealed the window and didn't speak again till morning. When the sun rose, the fog was still there, thicker than ever. We didn't even try breakfast. We just wanted out. Packed what we could, started walking the trail back toward the road, but the path had split. 2 forks where there'd been one. We took the left. It felt right. After an hour, we came out into a clearing. The same clearing, same trees, same grass flattened by our camper tires, but now the chimney was whole again. No vines, no broken bricks. Fresh red brick glowing faintly like it had been built yesterday. Smoke curled lazily from the top. Something in me broke. I stepped forward without thinking. My body felt pulled by invisible thread. Behind me, Ryan shouted my name, but his voice sounded far away, muffled like I was underwater. I took another step, and the humming returned. All around us this time, closer, voices layering over each other in endless repetition. Then everything stopped. The smoke. The humming. Even the fog froze mid-drift. The chimney began to crumble, slow and deliberate, brick by brick, falling into itself like time reversed. I turned and ran. We ran until my lungs tore at the edges. The forest blurred. Trees became walls, then corridors, then light again. When we stumbled out onto a gravel road, we collapsed. A pickup truck found us an hour later. The driver looked at us like we'd crawled out of the ground. When I asked where we were, he said we were lucky we didn't end up in Widow's Hollow. We didn't speak on the ride back. The van's engine rattled in tune with my own heartbeat. Ryan kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror, but no one had the words. When we reached the park headquarters, I reported nothing. Nothing about the fog, the chimney, the humming, or the footprints. I filed the usual patrol notes, but the truth? Nobody would believe it. Not without proof. And proof doesn't stay in this place. It vanishes when you try to show it to the light. That night back in my small ranger cabin, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like the branches in Hollow Ridge. Every shadow across the wall seemed to stretch with intent. I checked the clock, 3:14 a.m. 3:14 a.m. A note rested under my pillow. Simple, pale, almost like it had been slipped through the air itself. Don't look out the window at 3:14 a.m. I stared at it, stomach twisting, my own hand shaking as I held it. I hadn't packed anything like it. My mind tried to rationalize. A prank? A hallucination? But the handwriting, I didn't recognize it, and the paper smelled faintly of wet moss. I stayed on the floor, back against the bed, listening as the forest outside my cabin remained impossibly quiet. Morning brought normal sounds, but also a grim discovery. Every morning, on the small doorstep of the ranger cabin, a dead animal appeared. Not just any animal. Squirrels, rabbits, once even a small fox. Eyes wide open, never decomposing. They appeared the same size, same placement every single morning. Ryan, Mitch, and Dylan had the same thing at their cabins on separate assignments. We didn't speak about it, but we all saw it, knew it, understood the message. Hollow Ridge had reached us even here. Weeks passed. Patrols became exercises in paranoia. Every photo I took showed the faint figure at the edge of the frame, shadowy, thin, watching. My friends reported the same thing. On every trip, at every forgotten clearing, the silhouette appeared, always near the camera, but never moving, just observing. The park didn't care. They told me to log it as wildlife anomaly and move on. But I knew better. I went back to Hollow Ridge once, months later. Alone this time, hoping to prove it had been some trick of the fog. The forest greeted me like it remembered. Every step felt heavier, as if the trees themselves resisted my passage. When I reached the clearing, it was empty. Perfectly, almost cruelly normal. But the chimney, the one that had fallen in front of me, was intact, bricks blackened and warm, like someone had built a fire just before I arrived. I didn't step closer. I couldn't. I circled it, trying to map it, measure it, prove it wasn't supernatural. That's when I heard it. Humming, not faint this time. Direct. Around me, behind me, inside me, inside me. My body froze. Then a whisper at my shoulder. You shouldn't have returned. I ran. Not toward the road, not toward the van. Straight into the forest. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I don't know. Time in Hollow Ridge doesn't flow normally. When I finally broke onto the gravel road, a truck found me. The driver looked at me the same way as before, no questions, just a slow shake of his head. Back at the cabin, I started keeping a journal. Every photograph, every strange occurrence, every dead animal. I cataloged the whispering voices, the blue fabric, the footprints that weren't human. Every entry ended the same way. I don't know what's happening. I can't stop it. Sometimes I think Hollow Ridge follows us. The 3 friends who went with me all left the park. Ryan now works construction. Mitch drives trucks across state lines. Dylan teaches high school science. None of them go near forests. None of them speak of that weekend, but all of them have the same marks in their dreams. Faint shadows in corners, footsteps circling while they sleep, whispers in a language they don't understand. I've never spoken to anyone outside of our group about this. I can't. People would call me crazy, and maybe I am. But when I take patrols through Redwater Park, I always carry a camera, and sometimes, just sometimes, I see the figure in the distance, watching, waiting. No path leads there. No map to mark it. Yet, it exists, and it notices everything. The final time I ventured to the clearing, alone, I noticed the air itself seemed heavier. Each breath was a chore. The trees leaned in unnaturally. The chimney stood in perfect condition, smoke curling lazily, but the warmth it radiated, it wasn't fire. It was alive. Something breathing, something ancient. I moved closer, my boots pressed down into soft, almost imperceptible ground. That's when I saw it, a woman. Pale, long hair tangled with moss, eyes black and empty. She moved without moving, a shadow of herself, stepping through spaces that shouldn't exist. She hummed endlessly, tuneless, almost mournful, almost inviting. I wanted to run. My body refused. Her voice entered my mind, soft and echoing. You belong here now, Ranger. I pulled back, tripping over roots. I ran faster than I'd ever run, straight through brush, over rocks, over trails I didn't recognize, until finally, hours later, I stumbled onto the same gravel road. The world outside seemed normal again, but the forest had changed me. My friends, they were changed too. Sometimes at night I hear her again. Not in the forest, not in Hollow Ridge, but in the quiet of my own cabin. The humming, soft and endless, as if she is threading herself through my memory. Every photo I take, every patrol I record, a faint figure appears near the edges. Long-limbed, head tilted, just standing there. The note under my pillow still appears sometimes, though I keep it hidden. Don't look out the window at 3:14 a.m. I obey. But the whispers never stop. They move around the walls at night, breathing slowly, perfectly, deliberately, waiting. I have no answers, no escape. Only the knowledge that Hollow Ridge exists beyond reason, beyond maps, beyond time. It watches the living. It folds the forest to its will. And every single person who enters touches it in ways they cannot unsee. Sometimes I wake to find the blue fabric in my hands, dry and crumpled, like it came from nowhere. Sometimes I hear the low breathing outside the cabin, though I live alone. Every morning, a dead animal sits on my doorstep, eyes open, frozen, unchanging. And sometimes, when I photograph the forest for patrol records, a faint figure always appears behind me, just standing, just watching, head tilted slightly, waiting for me to move wrong. I don't know if Hollow Ridge is alive or if it's a place outside life itself. I only know that it remembers and it doesn't forgive. I am Caleb Morgan, Ranger of Redwater Park. And I am still alive, though I have no right to be. The forest calls me. The whispers never stop, and someday I know I will follow them back. Until then, I carry the shadows with me. Everywhere I go, they watch. Everywhere I sleep, they breathe. And every night at 3:14 a.m., I feel the pull of Hollow Ridge, humming my name, reminding me that silence and rot are never far away. I should have never taken that night shift. That's the first thought that crosses my mind every time the wind howls through the valley. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I thought being a ranger at Appalachia Ridge Park would heal something in me, a slow cure for a burned-out man. I had spent too many years chasing screens, reports, and restless nights in the city. The silence of the woods called me like a whisper saying, "Come rest here." But the woods don't rest. They listen. My name's Shane Price, and I've been a park ranger for almost 3 years now. Before that, I was a paramedic, the kind who saw too many faces fade before sunrise. My brother, Nareen, always said I needed something quieter, somewhere my head could breathe. When he passed in an accident 2 winters ago, I did exactly that. I packed up and drove east until the cell towers disappeared, until the roads narrowed to dirt and fog, and until I reached the ranger station that hung on the edge of a mountain town called Red Hollow. They said it was peaceful. They didn't say the forest had memories. The first day was fine. The lodge smelled like pine and rain, and the map on the wall looked like an open hand of trails and cabins scattered across the valley. My supervisor, Ranger Holt, handed me a ring of keys that jingled like bones. He said, "Stick close to the patrol line after dark. Stay off the old overlooked path. You hear anything weird on the radio, just log it, don't answer back." He smiled, but his eyes didn't. I thought it was just mountain superstition, the same kind you hear in every lonely town, but the longer you stay here, the more you realize silence isn't empty. It's full. That first week, campers came and went like ghosts. One night, a family rushed into the station, pale and shaking. The father said a ranger without eyes had walked past their tent. Said he wore the same tan uniform, same patch, same badge, but his face, nothing but skin, stretched smooth where eyes should be. The mother said he stopped just beyond their lantern light and whispered something like, "Don't stay past midnight." Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. I wrote the report, but Holt just nodded and said, "Don't worry about that one." Then he locked the paper in a drawer marked old cases. I started hearing things after that. A radio crackling in the corner even when turned off. A voice faintly reading the next day's weather report. Sometimes, even park closures, before they were decided. One night at 2:17 a.m., I heard it announce, "Trail collapse at North Overlook. Please keep visitors away." But there hadn't been any storm, no heavy rain. The next morning, I found the path had sunk 3 feet down, like something beneath had exhaled. I tried to convince myself it was old frequencies. Maybe static from nearby rangers. But Red Hollow's nearest station is 20 miles away, and they've been shut down for the season. Still, I logged it. Holt told me not to. He said the less you write down, the less the forest remembers you. Weeks passed. Then came the storm. Lightning carved the sky open like cracked bone. I was stationed at Cabin 3, the farthest outpost in the park, surrounded by nothing but trees older than America itself. The radio was dead, and the power line buzzed like it was chewing through the air. I found an old photo album in a drawer beside the cot, dust thick, pages yellowed. The first picture was of a group of rangers smiling outside the same cabin I was in. I turned the page, more photos, all in the same spot, but the smiles faded, faces blurred, eyes scratched out. Near the back, the pictures changed. They weren't rangers anymore. They were campers, families, kids. Every photo showed people sleeping in their bunks, faces slack, unaware the picture was taken. The last page showed a man standing by the window, camera in hand. My blood froze when I saw the uniform. It was mine, but it wasn't me. That night I couldn't sleep. Rain drummed the roof like fingers, steady and slow. Around 3:42 a.m., the floor creaked under weight that wasn't mine. I whispered Noreen's name, old habit, a brother's ghost of comfort, and grabbed my flashlight. Nothing, but the air felt wrong, thick like breath pressed close. The door opened on its own. Outside, the trees leaned in, branches swaying in a rhythm too human. I could hear something between them, a faint dragging sound like someone sewing through wet fabric. Then I saw it, a figure in ranger khaki, head tilted, face smooth as polished wood. No eyes, no mouth, just a blank stretch of skin, and hanging from his hand was a line of fishing thread, glinting in the light. Each end tied with something dark and small, maybe buttons, maybe not. The ranger without eyes. The stitcher. I slammed the door and radioed halt, but the signal only spat back my own voice, delayed by seconds, whispering the same words I just said. Then the static whispered, "He sees what you see." The lights went out. I ran. I hit the trail running, breath like fire in my chest. The rain blurred everything. My flashlight flickered, cutting the dark in pieces. The trees all looked the same, tall and watching. I knew I should have been heading toward the Overlook Road, but the trail kept twisting, looping me back to the same fallen tree again and again, moss curling like green veins. I realized then the forest was folding in on itself. Somewhere behind me, branches snapped. Not small, not light, big, slow, following. I shouted out, "Who's there?" No answer, just the forest breathing back. Then I felt it, a hand brushing the back of my neck, cold and certain, dragging down like it was marking where to sew. I ran harder. By the time I broke through to the service road, my boots were full of mud and blood from cuts I didn't remember getting. The cabin's outline glowed weak in the fog. I thought I saw movement at the window, a figure watching. I stumbled inside, locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and collapsed. The radio was on again. It was listing the next day's park bulletin. It said, "Ranger Shane Price missing after night patrol, search scheduled at sunrise." I looked around. The clock said 5:11 a.m. The sun hadn't risen. I was still here, but the forest had already decided otherwise. When dawn finally crawled over the ridge, I walked down to the ranger station. Holt wasn't there. The drawer that held old reports was open, and inside were dozens of photos from that same album, every ranger who'd gone missing over decades, all marked lost in service. One had a note on the back, "He stitches the ones who stay too long." I tried to call for help, but the phone line hissed and repeated my voice again and again. "Help me, help me, help me," until it turned into laughter. The park map on the wall had changed too. Where Cabin 3 used to be, there was only a dark mark shaped like an eye. I quit that same day, packed what I could, and left before the next sundown. But sometimes, when I drive through those hills, the radio cuts through static and plays a voice reading the weather. It says, "Search ongoing for missing ranger Shane Price. Last seen near North Overlook. Do not enter the forest after dark." And sometimes, in my rearview mirror, I swear I see him walking the tree line. My own uniform, my own face, skin smooth, eyes gone. The stitcher doesn't haunt the woods anymore. He wears my badge. He wears my badge. I never thought a forest could remember you, but sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees of Ashbrook National Park, I swear it says my name. I'm Daniel Hale, a park ranger who's worked these mountains for nearly a decade, and I used to think I knew every sound the woods could make until the day I heard nothing at all. It began one late September morning, crisp air, red leaves starting to fall. My job that day was simple: hike a newly marked loop trail, make sure it was clear before it opened to the public. 2 volunteers came with me, Levi and Claire, both college kids doing community service hours. They were cheerful, half awake, stuffing granola bars into their mouths while I checked the map. 6 miles, an overlook halfway through, easy terrain. Nothing about that day hinted it would end differently. We parked near the old Pine Run trailhead around 7:45 a.m., the sun low, fog still clinging to the grass. The first mile was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you love your job. The birds were singing, a woodpecker drummed somewhere in the distance, and the air smelled like pine sap and cold rock. We joked, compared snacks, and made fun of Levi for wearing bright orange sneakers in bear country. Everything felt normal. Then, about 30 minutes in, the woods went still. Not suddenly, but like a candle burning out. One sound after another disappeared until there was nothing left but the crunch of our boots. Even the wind seemed to vanish. It was the kind of silence that presses against your ears, heavy and wrong. Claire noticed it first. She stopped walking, eyes darting between the trees. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Exactly nothing. I tried to brush it off. "Maybe the storm front moved through," I said, though the sky was clear and blue. We kept going, but the quiet followed. I've heard silence before in these woods, but never like that. It felt alive, as if something was listening back. We reached a small clearing and took a break near a fallen oak. I checked my compass, then the printed map. Everything lined up. We were on track. When I looked up again, Levi was crouched near the trail, frowning. "Hey Dan," he said, "what kind of track is this?" I walked over. The print was deep, fresh, pressed into the dirt like something heavy had stepped there. But it wasn't round like a bear or hooved like a deer. It was long, with 5 narrow marks stretching forward like fingers. No claw impressions, no pads. Just 5 deep lines and a perfect curve behind them, almost like a hand. Claire whispered, "That's not an animal." Her voice trembled just enough to make me pretend I didn't hear the fear. Levi tried to laugh. Probably someone messing around, but he stepped back anyway. We moved on, quieter now. The further we walked, the more the landscape twisted. The slope grew steeper, though the map showed flat ground. A fork appeared where there shouldn't be one. Levi checked the guide twice, shaking his head. "It's wrong. The path's not supposed to split." We chose the left route, the one that looked more worn. It was a mistake. Minutes later, we passed a boulder shaped like a teardrop. 10 minutes after that, the same boulder appeared again, but on the opposite side of the trail. Claire muttered, "We're going in circles." I didn't answer. I was afraid to agree. Then came the dragging sound. Faint at first, somewhere behind us. Slow, steady, like something heavy being pulled through the leaves. We stopped. It stopped. We moved again. It followed. My hand rested on my radio. I pressed transmit. "Station 1, this is Ranger Hale, copy?" Static. I tried again. More static, but underneath it, for a split second, I heard breathing. Human. Then a whisper, "Don't look back." The voice was mine. Levi swore and backed up. Claire grabbed my arm. We started walking faster, too afraid to run, too terrified not to. The dragging sound kept pace. The forest darkened even though the sun should have been high. I glanced at my watch, 2:17 p.m., yet the light looked like dusk. That's when I saw it. Something pale flashed between the trees. Not a person, not an animal. Just movement too tall, too thin, gliding instead of walking. I blinked, and it was gone. Claire whispered, "There's someone out there." The dragging came again, louder now, closer. We reached a ridge and spotted a faint light through the trees. A lantern glow, bluish-white, swaying slowly as if carried by someone walking just ahead. Levi let out a breath of relief. Finally! Must be another ranger, but no ranger used that trail. I knew every patrol route, and no one was stationed out here. Still, we followed it, desperate for something human. The light led us down into a hollow, a small valley filled with mist. In the center stood a wooden post with a lantern hanging from a rusted hook. Its glass was cracked, the brass frame green with age. Inside burned a blue flame that didn't flicker in the wind. Levi reached for it. "Maybe it's gas." "Don't touch it," I said, but he already had. His fingers brushed the metal, and a sound rolled through the forest like the trees themselves groaning. The ground trembled. A smell like wet iron filled the air. From the fog beyond the hollow, something crawled forward, long limbs, skin gray and thin, joints bending backward. It moved like it had never learned how to walk. When it lifted its head, there was no face. Just a slit across where a mouth should be, twitching open and shut with a sound like air leaking from torn lungs. Claire screamed. Levi stumbled back. I grabbed her and shouted, "Run!" We crashed through the undergrowth, branches slapping our faces, lungs burning. The thing followed, not running, but sliding, fast and smooth, bones cracking with every move. The dragging sound grew frantic, chasing us through the trees. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The forest went silent again, but this time the silence felt normal. Birds sang somewhere far away. The air smelled like pine and sunlight. We slowed. I looked at my compass. The needle spun uselessly. Levi pointed to the ground-fresh prints beside ours, the same 5-fingered shape. One overlapped perfectly with my boot mark, as if it had stepped where I stepped. We walked until we found a sign we didn't remember seeing before: Ranger Cabin, 1 mile. Relief nearly made me cry. We reached the cabin just before sunset. Smoke rose from the chimney, though. I hadn't lit a fire that morning. Inside, everything looked untouched, except the radio. It was already on, humming softly. Then my voice came through it again. "You shouldn't have left it there." Claire backed toward the door. Levi stared at me. I know," I whispered. The message repeated, "You shouldn't have left it there." Then, slower, colder, "It followed you home." I shut the radio off and locked every door. That night, none of us slept. At 2:03, I smelled rain again. I stepped onto the porch. The forest shimmered under moonlight, and there it was, the lantern, sitting upright on the ground, burning bright blue. Beneath it, 3 fresh prints pressed deep into the soil. My phone buzzed in my pocket. No signal out here. Still, a new text glowed on the screen from my own number. "Stop looking outside." I looked up slowly. In the reflection of the window, something moved behind me. I don't remember screaming, but I woke at dawn on the floor, the cabin door wide open, the lantern gone. Claire and Levi were missing. Only their packs remained. When I radioed for help, they said I'd been off patrol for 3 days. Search teams found my truck, but no trace of the others. The trail we'd marked no longer appeared on any map. The GPS coordinates led to solid rock. I tried to quit after that, but the Park Service kept me, maybe out of pity, maybe because they needed someone who knew the story. I stopped going near the western ridge until one night 5 years later when the radio woke me again. "Daniel Hale," my own voice said, "you left something behind." I froze. The smell of rain filled the room, though it hadn't rained in weeks. Outside the window, a faint blue light flickered between the trees. The lantern had returned. I should have stayed inside, but I didn't. I took my flashlight and went down the trail. The forest welcomed me back like it had been waiting. Every few steps, I found prints in the frost, long, thin, pressed deep. They led straight to the hollow. The same clearing, the same post, the same lantern burning pale and cold. I lifted it. The metal bit into my palm, freezing. Around me, shadows formed into shapes, dozens of figures standing still between the trees, each holding a lantern of their own. Levi, Claire. Others I'd never met, all silent, all faceless. A whisper rose behind me. "You came back." I turned. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, taller than before, ribs showing through translucent skin. "What do you want?" I asked. It tilted its head. "Light must stay. You took light away." I looked at the lantern in my hand, its flame pulsing like a heart. "Then take me instead." The slit across its face opened wider, stretching upward into something like a grin. "You already did." The world folded in on itself. The forest roared, every lantern flaring white. Then, nothing. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the cabin again. Morning sun streamed through the windows. Everything looked normal, but on the desk lay a blank logbook, one line written in my handwriting: Patrol Report 19, Lantern Hollow Trail, pending. Outside, 2 young rangers parked their truck, laughing, holding maps. I tried to shout a warning, but my voice made no sound. My hand passed through the window glass like smoke. The woman frowned. "Did you see that?" Her partner shook his head. "Just glare." They walked down the trail. The lantern burned faintly on the porch. That was years ago, or yesterday. I'm not sure anymore. The Park Service reopened the ridge, renamed it Hollow Ridge Trail. They tell tourists the stories are myths, just ranger campfire talk. But every so often, hikers vanish. Radios pick up whispers that sound like echoes of their own voices. Some say they see a man in uniform standing between the trees holding a lantern that glows blue, watching. If you ever hike Ashbrook after dark and the air starts smelling like rain when the sky is clear, don't follow the light. Don't answer the voice. Because the lantern doesn't lead you out, it leads you home. I never planned to die in those mountains, but sometimes I think they had already chosen me long before I set foot in them. The first time I saw the ridges of the Blue Hollow stretch against the evening sky, they looked less like mountains and more like sleeping giants, their backs rising under a heavy green quilt. I'd been working as a ranger for the Appalachian State Preserve for 15 years by then, and the job had stopped feeling like work. Most days, it was a rhythm boots, trails, logs, reports, patrols. But there was something about Blue Hollow that always felt different, as if it were alive and aware of who entered and who left. They used to call me Tom Rayner, born and raised in Tennessee. My father was a logger, my mother a nurse who hated the woods. I took the ranger job because it made sense. I liked order, solitude, and the quiet judgment of trees. People said I was good at it. Reliable, calm under pressure. But they never saw the part of me that carried ghosts. 3 years before the Blue Hollow incident, I'd been stationed near Smoky Ridge. My partner then, Ranger Mason, vanished one morning while on solo patrol. They searched for 9 days, brought dogs, helicopters, everything. All they found was his pack near a creek and his logbook under a fallen branch, half soaked. The last entry had no words, just a small drawing of 6 vertical lines scratched into the page, like claw marks or tally marks. After that, I transferred to the northern sector, Blue Hollow. I told myself it was for the quiet. But maybe I just wanted to see what took him. I signed into duty the first week of October, when the forest smells like damp bark and cold air begins to creep down the hollows. The ranger station there was small, barely 3 rooms and a radio tower that coughed static more than it spoke. The only other ranger station nearby was Marie Dale, 28, sharp, a bit reckless but good at her job. We shared rotation logs. She covered the eastern trails. I handled the back ridge where the old mining roads cut deep into the forest like forgotten veins. The first week passed normal routine checks, weather reports, campsite warnings. Then small things began to happen. At first, it was the logbook. We keep a central log at the station for daily patrol notes. Every morning, I'd find a new entry under Mason's name, same handwriting, same style, perfectly written. Except Mason had been gone 3 years. The first one said, checked perimeter by creek. Found prints near ridge. Marie thought I was joking when I showed her. She said maybe someone copied the handwriting from an old record. But I knew it wasn't that. It looked fresh, written with the same black field pen Mason used to keep on his vest. I locked the book in the drawer that night, thinking I'd check the next morning. When I did, another entry had appeared. The drawer was still locked. The words read, "Don't go past the pine ring." I didn't know what that meant. On my next patrol, I decided to follow the ridge trail deeper. Most of the trails there aren't mapped for tourists. They twist around abandoned mine shafts and creek beds swallowed by moss. Around midday, I reached an area the locals called the hum. They say you can hear the ground vibrate there when the wind dies. I stopped, listened, and I heard it too, like the low electric hum of power lines. Only there were no lines anywhere near. Then something strange happened. I spoke Mason's name out loud. The hum grew louder, faintly rising like a pulse beneath the soil, as if the earth itself was whispering back. When I said another ranger's name, the sound vanished. I tried again. Same thing. Every time I said Mason's name, the forest seemed to react, like it remembered him. That night, the temperature dropped fast. I stayed in the station writing up my report, trying to rationalize what I'd heard. Static from the tower? Ground vibration from some underground current? The radio crackled around 9:15 p.m., and I heard what I thought was Marie's voice calling my name. But when I answered, the signal cut, and a second later another voice, quieter, raspier, repeated my name back with perfect imitation. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found Marie already gone for patrol. Her gear was missing, her log sheet empty. I tried the radio again, nothing. Around 7:45 a.m., I packed my own kit and followed her usual route east. 2 hours in, I found a clearing where the fog sat low, tangled in ferns. In the center lay a rabbit, not torn or half-eaten like you'd expect from a fox kill. It was open cleanly, like someone had dissected it with a scalpel. No blood spray, no struggle marks. Its body was laid out neat, paws aligned, head gone. I crouched close and saw something carved into the dirt beside it, 6 straight lines. The same mark from Mason's final entry. The forest around me went utterly still. No birds, no wind, only the hum. I left the clearing fast, trying to ignore how the humming grew louder the deeper I walked. Around midday, I found a small rusted object near a stream bank. At first, I thought it was a bottle cap, but when I brushed the mud away, it was an old metal whistle. Government issue, same kind we used decades ago. My heart dropped when I saw the faint letters on its side, MR. Mason Rayner. I turned it over, hesitating, then raised it to my lips. The whistle didn't sound at first, just a faint hiss. Then, from far away, somewhere in the trees, something answered back. A whistle, same pitch, same tone. Only this one came from the opposite ridge. I froze. My pulse felt like thunder in my throat. The echo came again, this time closer. I backed away slowly, eyes scanning the tree line. No movement. No animal noise. Just that steady hum under the soil, now stronger, almost vibrating through my boots. I didn't blow it again. I shoved the whistle in my pocket and made for higher ground. The forest grew thicker, branches clawing at my sleeves, roots twisting like veins across the soil. I could swear I heard footsteps pacing me from the left, matching every turn. Whenever I stopped, they stopped. When I moved, they moved. Always the same distance away, I tried to call out, no reply, just the low hum again. The forest felt alive, listening. By evening, I reached a narrow ridge overlooking 2 valleys. The sun bled orange between the peaks, and I could see faint smoke rising far below, probably from one of the old mines. I decided to camp there for the night, though every nerve in me screamed not to. I set up the tent fast, lit a small fire, and cooked a quick meal. Canned soup, instant noodles, nothing special. As the pot simmered, I felt that pressure again, the weight of unseen eyes. I turned slowly. About 30 feet out, at the edge of the trees, something stood. At first, I thought it was a burnt tree trunk. But then it moved, slow, deliberate, a man, or something that had been a man once. Tall, filthy, skin gray under layers of grime, hair hanging in ropes over his face. His clothes were shredded rags, and his eyes, what little I could see through the hair, reflected the firelight like an animal's. He crouched low, watching me, unmoving. I whispered, "Who's there?" though I already knew no one would answer. He stayed crouched for what felt like minutes, then slipped backward into the dark. No sound, no crunch of leaves. Just gone. I sat awake all night, back to my pack, knife in hand, waiting for dawn. Around 2:17 a.m. the noises started, rustling from every side, slow and methodical, like someone pacing circles around the camp. I aimed my light but saw only shapes between the trunks, moving just out of range. Every time I blinked, they seemed closer. I didn't sleep. When morning came, I broke camp fast and hiked north, not caring where the trail went. My compass spun like it couldn't find true north. Around mid-morning, I found another marker. A tree stripped of bark in 6 vertical lines from shoulder height to the roots. The cuts were clean, deliberate, freshly made. The wood underneath was pale, wet, still bleeding sap. The same marks again. The hum followed me wherever I went. It wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside my skull, a faint tremor every time I spoke Mason's name. By late afternoon, the trail thinned into a knife-edge ridge. I stopped, breath ragged, and saw 2 figures at the far end, barefoot, rail-thin, covered in filth. Their ribs stood out like sharp stones beneath gray skin. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stared, their faces hidden behind long mats of hair. I raised a hand, trying to signal I wasn't a threat. They didn't react. Then one crouched low, fingers digging into dirt, the exact way an animal coils before it pounces. I turned and ran. The ridge dropped into a steep slope and I slid half the way down, tearing through thorns, crashing into branches. The hum grew so loud it drowned everything else. When I hit the bottom, I splashed into a shallow stream and pushed through, boots filling with cold water. Behind me came a sound that didn't belong in any forest. A long, high-pitched whoop, echoed by others, then overlapping into a chorus of calls that rolled through the hills. It wasn't human, and yet it carried intent, coordination. They were signaling. Hunting. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed. Eventually, I burst onto an old gravel road overgrown with weeds. I followed it blindly until I saw headlights cutting through the fog. A ranger truck. The man inside leaned out the window, eyes wide. "You look like hell," he said. "Lost?" I nodded. Couldn't speak. He drove me back to the main station. The world felt unreal through the windshield trees, swaying slow, like they were breathing. The hum followed us for miles, faint but steady. At the station, they asked what happened. I told them I'd lost the trail, found nothing unusual. I lied. They wouldn't believe the truth. I went home that night, but sleep never came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those marks, those faces. The next morning, the station radio picked up a transmission at 7:45 a.m., a standard patrol check-in. The voice belonged to Marie. The problem was, she was still missing. They searched for days. Found her packed near the pine ring, whatever that was. Her logbook lay beside it, pages damp but legible. The last entry said, "He's still out here. The ground hums when he speaks the names." That was a month ago. I haven't gone back since, but sometimes late at night when the wind dies, I hear it, the faint electric hum under the floorboards, and sometimes the station's log system updates by itself. Entries written in my own handwriting. I checked the drawer. The whistle is still there. I don't touch it. The other day, I found something new in the system. A digital entry, time-stamped 2:17 a.m. It said, "Tom checked perimeter, found prints near ridge," except I was asleep in my house when it appeared. I tell myself I won't go back, that I've learned. But the truth is, those mountains don't let go. They whisper at night, call you by name, hum when you answer. And sometimes, if you listen too long, you start humming back. I wish I'd turned around when I saw the tree. It looked like every other pine in the forest, but the temperature dropped 20 degrees when I passed it. I told myself it was just wind from the ridge, nothing strange, but part of me knew better. My name's Leo Ward, and I've worked as a park ranger in Appalachian National Reserve for 15 years. The kind of job where silence is normal, where fog rolls like breath through valleys, and where your radio sometimes crackles with voices that don't belong to anyone. I used to love it. The quiet, the steady rhythm of boots on earth, the sense that the world could still be untouched by people. That was before last summer, before the screaming. It was a Saturday afternoon, sky clear, air warm but soft, no storms on the forecast. My brother Darren had driven up from town, and like always, we wanted to explore something new. We'd grown up hiking these hills, finding trails most maps forgot. He joked that half our childhood was spent lost on purpose. So when he showed up with his old truck and a bag of gas station snacks, I didn't hesitate. We picked a direction and drove. No plan, no destination, just a road through the trees and the sound of gravel popping under tires. We laughed about the same dumb things we always did. Old bands, ex-girlfriends, stories from college that got funnier with time. It felt like every trip before it, harmless and familiar. Until we found the road that wasn't on any map. A thin gravel strip cut off the main path. Barely enough space for one car. No signs, no trail markers. Just a gap between the trees and the faint outline of a dirt track leading into the woods. Darren grinned. said it looked like a place people weren't supposed to find. That was always enough reason for us to check it out. We parked, stuffed the truck key under the seat, and started walking. The forest swallowed the road fast. The air grew still, quieter than it should have been. Even the bugs seemed to stop buzzing. It wasn't creepy yet, just strange, like stepping into a room after someone's been there too long. The path climbed slow, winding between pines and oaks, roots curling like old hands across the dirt. About 30 minutes in, the trees thinned, and that's when we saw them, rusted train tracks twisting out of the ground like bones. They looked ancient, metal warped and half-buried, wooden ties eaten by moss. The tracks ran straight ahead to what used to be a bridge, or part of one. Only a skeleton remained, broken beams and metal ribs hanging over a narrow valley. Some pieces looked melted, as if time had burned them instead of rusted them. It was beautiful, in a ruined kind of way, the forest taking back what people had abandoned. Darren gave me that grin again. The one that meant, we're going down there. I sighed but followed. The slope was steep, rocks sliding underfoot, dirt giving way in clumps. By the time we reached the bottom, my legs were shaking and my hands scraped raw. The bridge towered above us, black metal against the sky. From underneath, it looked like a dying animal, ribs cracked open, pieces dangling where they shouldn't have stayed. We wandered for a while, poking at fallen bolts and splintered wood. The ground was littered with old nails and pieces of track that had slid halfway down the hill. It didn't feel like a place anyone should be. No signs of construction, no warning tape, nothing. Just forgotten. That's when we decided to climb back up. And that's when everything changed. Halfway up, Darren stopped to catch his breath. I leaned on a tree, hands on my knees, sweat dripping into my eyes. That's when I heard it. A scream. Not close, not far. Just there. It wasn't the kind of scream you hear when someone's in trouble. It wasn't human, not really. It carried no words, no direction, just fury. Long, stretched, raw, the kind of sound that makes your bones feel thinner. We froze, looked at each other. Then it came again, sharper this time, like the air itself was ripping apart. I whispered that it was maybe some lost hiker or an animal, though no animal I'd ever heard screamed like that. The moment I said it, the sound moved. It didn't echo. It didn't fade. It just shifted. From ahead of us to our right, then behind, then to our left again, like it was circling us. Darren gripped a branch, white-knuckled. I picked up a rock, feeling stupid for thinking it would matter. The scream flickered again, now overhead, now beside us, now close enough to feel it hum through the trees. We ran. Roots tore at our boots. Branches slapped our faces. The sound followed, darting from side to side faster than we could move. It didn't have footsteps. It didn't breathe. It just existed wherever it wanted to be. Every shift was wrong, too sudden, too close. The forest twisted around us, or maybe it was just panic, but I swear the path changed. One second the trail was clear, the next it was gone. We stumbled through brush until finally, miraculously, the truck appeared between the trees. We didn't stop running. We jumped inside, slammed the doors, sat there panting like we'd outrun a fire. The forest was quiet again. Too quiet. I turned the key. The truck started. Normal sound, normal world. I dared to look in the rearview mirror. Nothing there, just trees. We drove until the forest thinned and the mountains dipped away behind us. Only when we hit pavement again did Darren finally speak. He asked, "Did it sound like words to you?" I said no. He nodded. That was enough. We didn't talk after that. Not about the scream, not about the bridge. I thought it was over. But a week later, I was back on duty, walking patrol near the southern ridge. The same tree line, the same quiet, and then cold. A sudden, sharp drop, just like before. 20 degrees gone in an instant. I looked around, and there it was, that same pine tree. I don't know how I knew it was the same one, but I did. Every time I passed it after that, the air turned freezing. My breath fogged, even in sunlight. I told my supervisor, Ranger Harlow, but he just shrugged. Said cold pockets happen in the mountains. but his voice shook a little when he said it. The weeks that followed were worse. Shadows where there shouldn't be. Whispers through the radio, static that sounded almost like someone saying my name. I started waking up at night in my ranger cabin, certain someone was outside. One morning, I saw it. A shadow figure, standing in the fog just past the tree line, facing away from me, perfectly still. I thought it was another ranger, maybe a lost camper, until I realized I could see through it. I stepped outside, called out, no answer, and thou answer. When I got closer, it vanished, like it had never been there. I told myself it was exhaustion. I'd been working long hours, maybe not sleeping enough. But then came the photo. Each ranger has an ID badge with their picture. Mine had been the same for 5 years. Same uniform, same smile. One morning, I glanced at it and froze. The face wasn't mine, not exactly. It was older, eyes darker, skin paler. Every few days, it changed more. By the end of the month, the man in the photo looked 20 years older than me, but I hadn't aged a day. I stopped sleeping after that. I patrolled less. I told myself I'd quit, leave the mountains, go somewhere flat and warm where trees couldn't hide anything. But every time I tried to pack, I'd hear it again. The scream, faint, far away but getting closer. Sometimes I'd wake up to find dirt on my hands, mud on my boots, though I hadn't left the cabin. Sometimes my reflection in the window moved when I didn't. Once, I caught myself walking toward that same hidden road, the one with the tracks. I didn't even realize until I was halfway there, like something in the forest was calling me back. That's when I understood the stories. The locals talk about a man who went missing near the old line, a ranger who screamed until his voice got trapped in the trees. Some say it was never a man at all, just something the forest keeps when it's lonely. Last week, 2 hikers disappeared near the ridge. They said on the radio that search teams found the truck. The engine was cold. The windows fogged from the inside. On the passenger seat, they found a ranger badge. It had my name on it. And the photo looked older than ever. They called my cell, but I never answered. I don't remember leaving the cabin, but I must have. I remember the cold, the pine tree, the whisper that said, you were never supposed to leave. Sometimes, when the fog rolls down the mountain at dawn, I can see the cabin from far below. A shadow stands outside it, facing away. If you approach, it disappears, and the forest goes quiet again, like it's waiting. I should have never gone back to those mountains, not after what happened that night when the forest forgot how to breathe. I was 34 when it happened. My name's Aaron Keller, and I had taken a maintenance job at Red Hollow Reserve, a secluded patch of wilderness deep in the Appalachian stretch. I wasn't looking for glory or a career, not anymore. I just needed a quiet place to disappear for a while, somewhere the noise of the city couldn't reach me, somewhere my thoughts would finally slow down. Red Hollow was supposed to be that place. The job was simple enough. Fix broken signs, check water pumps, keep the trails clean, and make sure the campers didn't attract bears with their midnight barbecues. Nothing about it was complicated, and that's what I liked. The campground lay in a deep valley surrounded by sharp ridges and endless trees, the kind that swallowed your phone signal before you even turned into the parking lot. They gave me a key to a small ranger cabin behind the visitor lodge, a single room with a squeaky cot, a metal desk, and a heater that coughed more than it hummed. Still, it was peaceful, the kind of peace that felt almost heavy. The air was cool, and the nights were wrapped in velvet silence. I didn't realize then that silence could rot. Days turned into a steady rhythm. I woke before dawn, boiled coffee on the small stove, and walked the loops through the campsites, checked the pump valves, cleared trash, cleaned fire pits. Simple, honest, predictable. Evenings, I'd grab my flashlight and patrol the gravel trails. Sometimes I'd find a group of weekend campers too loud, or a leftover cooler forgotten by a family heading home. That was my world. Small, steady, safe. Then came the night that broke it. It was late October, the kind of night where frost bit the air and fog clung low to the ground. Most of the campers had already packed up, leaving only a handful of tents scattered through the valley. I remember the time. It was around 11:46 p.m., the hour when everything feels thinner, quieter. I was finishing my patrol when I spotted it. A bright blue cooler left at Site 12, right near the tree line. Someone had forgotten it beside the extinguished fire pit. I cursed softly and walked over. That's exactly how you invite bears to dinner, I thought. The cooler was heavier than I expected. It sloshed faintly when I lifted it, so I didn't bother to open it, just hauled it up the slope to the storage shed beside the bathhouse. When I came back out, I noticed it. The forest had stopped. No insects, no wind, not even the distant rush of the creek. It was like stepping into a soundless box. Every crunch of my boots against gravel echoed too sharp, too hollow. My skin prickled as if the air itself had teeth. I froze and listened. Nothing. Just the heavy thump of my own heartbeat and the faint drip from the gutter above the bathhouse roof. I told myself it was just my imagination, maybe my ears adjusting to the cold. But then, I saw it. Something crouched near the edge of the trail, about 20 feet ahead. At first, I thought it was a bear, dark and bulky, unmoving. But then the shape shifted, slow and deliberate, and I realized I was wrong. Its limbs were too long. I lifted my flashlight, and the beam caught something that should not have existed. The face, if you could call it that, was pale and smooth like wet paper. The eyes were too large, round and glossy, not glowing, not reflecting, just watching. Its arms hung low, and the elbows bent wrong, backward maybe, like a puppet strung up by broken wires. It looked human, but only in the way a scarecrow looks human. My voice came out before I could stop it. I said something like, "I'm not here to bother you." The words barely left my mouth before the thing moved. Not a step, not a sound. It slid forward smooth as smoke, its legs bending too late, its shoulders rolling like liquid. I stepped back, and it matched me, same pace, same distance, mirroring my breath. My hands were ice, my flashlight trembled. Another step, it followed. No sound, no growl, no hiss, just silence in those eyes. Then I turned and ran. My boots hammered the gravel, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly off the trees. I didn't hear it behind me, but I could feel it. That strange pull, like something watching from every shadow. The ranger station's porch light glowed ahead like salvation. When I reached the steps, I dared one glance back. It was closer, standing still, maybe 30 feet away, arms dangling, head tilted slightly to one side. Then I blinked, and it was gone. I locked the station door, bolted it, pressed my back against the wall. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. The heater groaned awake, the only sound left in the world. I stayed there all night, gripping the radio that never made a sound. When dawn came, the forest had sound again. Wind, birds, insects, life. But something in me stayed broken. The next morning, I convinced two co-workers, Mason and Claire, to come with me back to the trail. I told them a bear had spooked me. Mason laughed. Claire didn't. She had been working there longer and said strange things sometimes happen near that ridge. We reached the spot. My footprints were still there, scattered and panicked. Beside them, deep impressions, long jointed marks, sharp at the ends like claws, but set too far apart. Mason said the rocks shifted overnight. I didn't argue, but as we turned to leave, Claire stopped near a boulder beside the path. Her flashlight beam caught something etched into the stone. I walked closer. It was handwriting, shaky, old, half-faded, but mine. My name scratched deep into the surface, followed by a date. October 29, 1963. 30 years before I was born. I stepped back, cold crawling up my neck. I never told them what it said. They just saw my face and went quiet. That night, I couldn't sleep. The forest outside the cabin felt alive again, whispering in a language made of creaks and sighs. Around 2:17 a.m., the door handle rattled once, soft but clear. Then I heard it, the distinct sound of the deadbolt sliding into place from the inside. But I was already inside. The next morning, I found the same carvings on the cabin's door frame, My name, again, but newer this time, as if carved hours before. I wanted to leave, but something held me there. Maybe curiosity, maybe fear wearing the mask of duty. I needed to know what was happening in Red Hollow. Days passed, each one quieter than the last. The campers left. The valley emptied. And one evening, while checking the North Ridge Trail, I heard it. Faint, distant, a sound that didn't belong. Laughter. A child's laughter, soft and bright, echoing through the trees. But there hadn't been a family here in weeks. I followed it. Each step took me deeper into the woods, past the creek, through the thinning pines, until I reached a clearing I'd never seen before. At the center stood an old, burned-out ranger station, half-collapsed, black with rot. The laughter stopped. Inside, the walls were covered with names, hundreds of them carved in jagged letters, some overlapping, some half-erased. And there, near the door, was mine again. This time with the words "still here" etched beneath it. The air grew colder, and I felt that pressure again, that heavy silence pressing down, crushing sound itself. My flashlight flickered once, then died. In the darkness I saw movement, a figure standing where the light had been. Too tall, too still, too still. Its voice, if it was a voice, came not from the air but from inside my skull, soft and steady, like my own thoughts turned against me. "You locked the door." I ran, crashing through branches, cutting my arms, lungs burning. I didn't look back. Not once. By dawn, I was miles away, parked on the edge of the highway, shaking and drenched in sweat. I quit that morning, never went back. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the latch turning, that faint click echoing from somewhere deep inside my memory. And every now and then, when I hike alone, I find carvings on stones I don't remember touching. My name, and the same words, always the same. Still here. I should have never taken that assignment. I told myself it was just another post, another few weeks of quiet patrols deep in the Appalachia backcountry, but I think I knew the truth even before the first night. My name's Jonah Hale, and I was a park ranger for the Appalachian Wildlife Reserve, a stretch of mountain forest that barely shows up on state maps. I'd been doing this job for almost 10 years. Fire watch, trail safety, lost hikers, the usual. I'd seen wild things out there, bears, storms, and loneliness that eats through your thoughts like rot, but nothing like what I found in Hollow Creek District. They told me the cabin was isolated, perfect for solo assignments. I'd been asking for space anyway. My head wasn't right. Too much noise, too many memories that looped at night. The department thought a few weeks in the quiet would do me good. I thought so too. The ranger cabin sat at the edge of a ridge called Ash Hollow, about 8 miles west of the main road. The kind of place the map labels with a dot and a name that doesn't exist anymore. The only way up was a dirt road full of switchbacks that kept getting narrower until it was basically a trail. When I got there, the sun was bleeding out behind the tree line, and the shadows stretched long like cracks in the earth. The cabin looked older than it should. Logs dark with sap and smoke, roof sagging a little, porch leaning forward like it was tired of standing. Inside was just enough to live. A cot, a wood stove, a small table, a hand crank radio, and a wall map of the park nailed above the desk. The air smelled like pine, old paper, and something faintly metallic, like a coin held too long in your mouth. I unloaded my gear, made a fire, and sat outside for a while. The sky was so clear it hurt to look at, and the forest hummed with cicadas. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. I remember thinking maybe this was what I needed. Space, quiet, and time to reset. But peace doesn't last long in the mountains. That first night, around 10:48 p.m., I caught the smell of smoke. Not from my fire. This was wood smoke, dry and sweet like burning oak. It drifted in through the trees, faint but distinct. I went outside, checked the wind, looked toward the valley. No glow, no flicker, nothing. I radioed dispatch, asked if anyone else was burning out here. No answer, just static. I waited a while, shrugged it off, and went back inside. The next morning, I noticed something strange. The map on the wall, the one showing all the trails and landmarks, looked different. Subtle, but enough that I knew. The Hollow Ridge Trail, which had been drawn as a simple loop, now curved further north, past a creek that wasn't marked before. I thought maybe I remembered wrong, or maybe it was a different version of the map, but it kept bothering me all day. By the second night, I started hearing things on the radio. At first, it was normal static, then a soft crackle that turned into a voice. An old man's voice, calm, clipped, reciting something like a park announcement. It said things like, "Welcome visitors to the Hollow Creek Preserve. Please stay on marked trails." The words sounded old-fashioned, the kind of phrasing they used in the 50s. Then the message repeated, over and over. I tried switching frequencies, but every channel gave me the same broadcast, same voice, same message. When I checked with headquarters later that day, they told me Hollow Creek hadn't had an active visitor broadcast in decades. The old tower burned down sometime in the 70s. That night, the wood smoke came back. Thicker this time. I followed it down the hill, flashlight cutting through the dark. The forest seemed to close in around me. The smell grew stronger, but no matter how far I walked, I couldn't find the fire. The smoke just drifted between the trees like a living thing, moving where the wind didn't. At 2:17 a.m., I woke to a sound. Slow, heavy knocks against the side of the cabin. Not frantic, just steady, like someone tapping a rhythm with their knuckles. 3 knocks, then silence. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped to the porch, and waited. The forest was a void. No crickets, no rustle, nothing. Just a soundless wall of trees. The air felt colder than it should. I aimed the beam across the clearing, but it hit only mist and pine trunks. No footprints. No sign of anyone. The next morning, the ground beneath that wall had 2 bare footprints in the dirt. Human, long toes, almost stretched. The prints didn't look like someone walking. They looked like someone standing still, waiting. I radioed it in, but the call didn't go through. Static again. The radio light flickered weakly, and just as I was about to shut it off, the voice returned. This time, it didn't sound like a recording. It said, in a slow, broken tone, "Fire watch is complete. All trails are closed beyond the ridge." Then silence. Something about the way it said "closed beyond the ridge" made my stomach twist. I turned toward the map. The trails had changed again. The Hollow Ridge path was now marked with a red X where the creek used to be. And below it, written in faint pencil, were the words, "Don't go past here." That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. I sat by the stove, staring at the wall, watching the flames' reflection dance across the metal. I thought about my father. He was a ranger once, back before radios and paved trails. He died out here, not far from these same woods. Fell during a search mission, they said. But the part no one talks about is how his last log entry mentions smoke he couldn't trace and voices calling his name through the fog. I told myself it was coincidence. At 3:42 a.m., something scraped along the outside wall, a slow, dragging sound, like nails or fingers trailing against wood. I froze. The sound moved from one side of the cabin to the other, steady and patient. When it reached the window, I saw a shadow move past the curtain. Tall, too tall, shoulders narrow, arms long enough to brush the ground. Then came the whisper, not from outside, from the radio. My name, spoken softly, the syllables stretched too far. "Jonah, come out, come out." The voice changed as it repeated. The first was my mother's voice, trembling like when she used to wake me after nightmares. The next was a man's voice, deeper, rougher, like my old training partner, Ben. The third voice didn't belong to anyone I knew. Cold, urgent, layered beneath the others. "Come out, Jonah." The fire's waiting. I sat frozen until dawn. When the sun finally broke, I went outside. There were marks along the cabin wall, streaks in the wood, like something sharp had dragged through it. And in the dirt beneath the window, the same bare footprints, but this time there were more. A dozen, maybe more, circling the cabin like a ritual. I packed my gear, started the truck, and drove toward the main road. The forest felt different in daylight. Wrong somehow. The trees lean closer, their trunks too tightly spaced. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone standing in the road behind me. When I reached the ranger station in Red Hollow, I turned in the keys and wrote my report. They barely read it, just told me to take a few days off. I didn't argue. 2 weeks later, a brown envelope showed up at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a folded park map. My map. Only the trails were rearranged again, and across the bottom, written in red ink, was my name. Beneath it, a single sentence: "You left the fire burning." I haven't gone back to the mountains since. But sometimes, late at night, around 2:17 a.m., I smell that same dry oak smoke drifting through my window. And the radio on my nightstand, the one I never use, clicks on by itself, just long enough to whisper the same line every time: "Fire watch is complete. All trails are closed beyond the ridge."